May 1945. Bavaria, Germany. A German baron walked back toward his family castle, expecting the Americans to return what had belonged to his bloodline for generations. But inside those stone walls, American soldiers had already taken control, and General George S. Patton had no interest in protecting a nobleman's pride. The baron wanted his castle back. Patton gave him something else instead, a lesson in defeat. And before this story was over, one of Germany's proud old castles would be turned into the last thing the baron ever expected. The exact details of this wartime story are difficult to verify, and like many stories from the final days of World War II, it has been retold in different ways. But it has survived for a reason. It captures something very real about Patton, about occupation, and about what happened when Germany's old ruling class met the hard reality of defeat. In May 1945, Germany was no longer the powerful empire Hitler had promised. Its cities were damaged. Its army was surrendering. Roads were crowded with refugees, prisoners, broken wagons, and soldiers who no longer knew where to go. American troops were moving through Bavaria, taking control of towns, roads, bridges, factories, railway stations, mansions, and sometimes even castles. To the baron, the castle was home. It was family history. It was land, bloodline, and pride. Its walls had stood for generations, watching over the countryside like a silent reminder of who had power and who did not. But to the American army, the castle meant something very different. It was shelter. It was storage. It was a useful building in a defeated country. And in war, useful things rarely stay untouched. That was the first painful truth the baron had to face. The castle still looked like his. The tower still stood. The stone walls still carried the memory of his family. But the guards at the gate were American, the orders inside were American, and the decision no longer belonged to him. Imagine him approaching the castle road. The countryside is quiet, but not peaceful. The war has ended, yet everything still feels broken. American jeeps sit near the entrance. Soldiers move through the courtyard. Boots scrape against stone. English voices echo inside halls that once belonged to servants, guests, and family members. Then the baron steps forward. Maybe he expects the men at the gate to recognize his name. Maybe he expects a conversation. Maybe he believes that even in defeat, old families should still be treated with respect. But the soldiers do not step aside like servants. They do not lower their voices because a nobleman has arrived. They do not treat his title like an order. To them, he is not a lord returning home. He is a civilian in occupied Germany, and that is where the humiliation begins. The baron could still point to the castle and call it his, but every visible sign of power said otherwise. The vehicles were American. The rifles were American. The authority was American. The land had not moved, the castle had not changed, but the world around it had, and standing behind that new world was General George S. Patton. Patton did not argue about bloodlines. He did not need a long meeting about family history. He looked at the castle the way a commander looks at ground. Who controls it? Who needs it? What purpose can it serve? That was how Patton thought. He was not built for soft occupation politics. He was built for movement, pressure, and command. During the war, his Third Army had moved fast across Europe, pushing through France and into Germany with a speed that made his name feared and respected. Patton believed that hesitation could cost lives. He believed that war rewarded men who acted before others were ready. So when a German baron demanded his castle back, Patton was not likely to see a tragic family problem. He saw a defeated man asking for privilege, and the answer, according to the famous story, was blunt. The castle would not be returned, would be used not as a noble residence, not as a family estate, not as a symbol of old European pride, but as a stable, a castle filled with horses. That was the twist that made the story unforgettable. For the baron, it must have felt like more than losing property. It was one thing to see foreign soldiers in his home. It was another to see the rooms of his family castle reduced to military use. But the deepest insult was what replaced him inside it. Horses. A noble residence, a family symbol, a place of old pride, filled with animals under American control. But the stable was not the real insult. The real insult was what it said without a single speech. Your title does not command this place anymore. And to understand why Patton chose horses, you only need to understand one thing about him. Patton was famous as a tank commander, but in his heart he was still a cavalryman. He loved horses. He respected discipline, riding, balance, and control. Even in a war ruled by engines, steel, and artillery, Patton still admired the animal that had carried soldiers for centuries. So to another commander, using a castle as a stable might have been only practical. To Patton, it fit perfectly. The Baron came to defend his inheritance. Patton used it for cavalry tradition. And in that moment, the castle stopped being a noble home and became part of the machinery of occupation. But this story was not only about one angry landowner. It was about what happens when a ruling class loses the war it thought it could survive. For years, Germany's leaders had promised victory. They had filled the country with speeches, flags, uniforms, and dreams of empire. But by May 1945, those dreams had collapsed into rubble. The people who once believed Germany would dominate Europe were now watching foreign armies decide what could be used, who could move, and who had authority. That is why the castle mattered. The Baron may have walked in expecting a discussion about property. Instead, he met the reality of defeat. And that reality was cold. The Americans had not crossed France, fought through Germany, slept in mud, crossed rivers, and buried friends just to protect the feelings of a nobleman after surrender. Many of those soldiers had seen ruined towns, broken families, and the damage Nazi rule had left behind. So when members of Germany's old elite asked for comfort, property, or special treatment, many Allied soldiers had little patience. That does not mean every German nobleman was guilty. Some resisted Hitler, some supported him, some stayed silent. But to American soldiers in 1945, Germany's powerful people were now asking for comfort while Europe was still broken. Patton understood that mood. He could respect courage. He could respect discipline. He could even respect a strong enemy on the battlefield. But he had little interest in protecting someone's pride because of a title. To him, the castle was not sacred. It was a building. And if the army needed it, the army would use it. That is where the story becomes uncomfortable. Was Patton being cruel? Or was he simply showing the Baron what defeat meant? From the Baron's side, the castle was personal. It may have held childhood memories, portraits, old furniture, and the history of generations. Losing it must have felt like losing part of himself. But from Patton's side, the question was simpler. Who controlled the ground? Who had responsibility for order? Who had paid the cost of victory? The answer was not the Baron. The answer was the army. Can you imagine that moment? The Baron looks at the walls and still sees his family home. But the men inside see barracks, storage, animals, and military need. He hears English in the halls. He sees boots on the floors. He sees soldiers who do not ask permission, and then he understands. The castle still stands, but it no longer speaks for him. Patton's personality made the story even sharper. He was one of the most aggressive American commanders of World War II. He believed in speed, pressure, and bold action. His soldiers moved fast because he demanded it. His enemies feared him because he did not like to wait. But outside the battlefield, that same force made him difficult. Patton was not always careful. He was not always diplomatic. He could be dramatic, harsh, and impatient. He understood that a single gesture could say more than a long speech. Turning a German castle into a stable was exactly that kind of gesture. No long debate, no polite ceremony. No gentle explanation, just one decision that everyone could understand. The Baron asked for a castle, Patton gave him horses, and that was the real lesson. The walls still stood. The towers still looked over Bavaria. The family name may still have meant something on paper, but in May 1945, the power inside that castle had changed hands. The orders were American, the guards were American, and inside the rooms where noble pride once lived, horses now stood under the control of the army that had won. War does not only change borders, it changes what power means. The German Baron wanted his castle back, but Patton made sure he understood one thing: the old world was not coming back.